And with that, I'd like to introduce Curt Collier, reintroduce Curt Collier, our leader, who will be speaking on where we are headed.
We're using a slightly abbreviated kind of program today in order to give us some time to talk about these things that we have coming in to get your input. I thought it would be great at the beginning of the top of the year in January to kind of reflect on what's happening at the society, let you know of kind of where we've been putting our focus and attention, and some things that I think that we need to pay attention to along the way. You know, I often am asked, like, what is the purpose of an ethical society? Like, why do you exist? What is this place? Why do you meet on Sunday mornings? You know, why do you operate kind of like a church? I'm Mary and Barry, and we do services and have gatherings and things like that. But you're not like any church they've ever seen. There's no focus on a theist or beliefs and those kinds of stuff. So what is it that you do if you're not doing that? Which is what I frequently get asked. You know, when Adler was a young man, how old was Adler when he started this movement in 1876? 23, yeah. 23 years of age. And I think, God, what did I know about the world at 23 years? Absolutely nothing. He himself said a lot of dumb things along the way, like young adults do. Just think his prefrontal cortex hadn't even finished forming by that age. And yet here he is trying to figure out that there's something wrong with the way that we gather on Sunday mornings in this country. There's something missing from that. And he also thought that what you hear, the typical message that we hear if we would go to a synagogue or to the church or to other places, is that you are sinners and broken people, and there's nothing that good can come for you. And the only thing that you should do is to believe in X or go in this direction, and because you will never figure this out on your own. You know, I think of the United States in 1876. We had just gone through the Civil War. There's a lot of good reasons to believe that. We had just liberated people we had enslaved in this country, taking people from other places and robbing them of their futures and lives that we are still trying to unpack to this day, the damage that we have done. And so here's this young guy trying to figure out what's doing and how to make sense. And he thought there's just something wrong with all of that. And he wanted to know what we should do. Now, he had a lot of mentors. In fact, in the books that he creates a book. You know, probably none of you have ever seen this book or read this book, because we don't think you have to do that in the ethical culture movement. But he goes to this book, and in that book, he says, there are a couple of people I want to thank. And he does thank, you know, some religious leaders that had come from him. He was studying to be a rabbi when he was a young man and ultimately rejected that. But he does thank his own religious traditions. He thanks some of the Christian teachers who had come before. And then he has a whole chapter on Emerson, who was one of his tutors. Ralph Waldo Emerson was the great kind of Unitarian minister of his day, who left the Unitarian pulpit to do more writing and more speaking broadly. Emerson had tried to say that what we need to do is each liberate ourselves from the oppressive ideas that we've been shackled with from our birth. And that what we needed to do is to go into place and individually kind of work our self-reliance, he writes a book, or just go into nature and liberate ourselves from the toxic kind of things that we have done in this country. And what we needed to build were self-culture halls where we could come together and cultivate ourselves as individuals. Now, that is his mentor. Adler's listening to them. It's pretty sound advice for a young man thinking about these things. But he thought also there was something quite kind of wrong with that. And his statement is how far can I, sitting alone in a closet or by myself, really liberate myself from anything? Now, we all need time to pull back. We need time for reflection to maybe find our still voice. But we also need other people to work with us and to struggle with us and to hear the voices of other people who may look at you and say, Curt, you're kind of a jerk sometimes. I hear that all the time from y'all, know, but and that we do need others. And what Adler said is we need, first of all, to do a couple things. We need to remember that the affirmation of the worth and the dignity has to be the starting place, not the end place. We can't say you all fell short, you're sinners in the hands of an angry God or whatever, you're broken, you can never do that. He's going to start with the idea, I think that's wrong. I think we start by saying you're good enough and you have worth in yourself, and we can just, maybe not perfect, but who cares? As the Al Black statement says, we're called to be human, not the perfect, and that we're here to just kind of figure that out. But he did say that we need a culture that does elicit our best, right? We're in context all the time, all these things that happen to us as soon as we walk out the door. We all read the news. Most ethical culture are news junkies. And then you look at what's going on down in Florida. Have you heard the latest craziness from their governor down there that he wants to ban African-American studies in high school because he thinks that's too divisive? What bull crap is that? Really, you just want to go down there and look at him, and for the people down there, like, what did you do electing this person who already said, oh, well, by the way, we don't want to talk about gender differences. We don't want to talk about sexuality. We don't want to talk about those things anymore. And that's the complete opposite direction that we should be going into. And it proves Adler's point once again that context matters and that we need kind of a philosophy of groups, he says in his book. We need a new philosophy of groups in this country because we don't have one that's working. And we need that. He knew it had a basis in democracy. He puts a lot towards that. But then even what it would say when we say democracy, but then how do we put in all these other things we know today, such as equity and equality and other things that have to happen as well. So in 1918, towards the end of his life, when he created ethical culture at age 23 in 1876. And then towards the end of his life, he writes a book called An Ethical Philosophy of Life. Not the ethical philosophy of life, an ethical philosophy of life, which means I'm throwing this out there from my years of wrestling. He worked on all of these projects across the United States, and outside is a banner just showing a small percentage of the stuff that the early ethical cultures did. And in the preface of that book, he says a couple things need to happen. The first two that he highlights is how are we going to establish the fundamental ethical dictum that every human being ought to count and has intrinsic worth? Because the culture doesn't say that. Plain as that. The culture doesn't say to us that every human being has intrinsic worth. Just look at how we treat one another and how we run our business. And then he asked the question, how are we going to link up all of our activities and science, art, politics, business to that supreme ethical end? How do we exist in the marketplace of ideas? It's so often in times we think in modern day terms about our religion as philosophy. It's something that we do separate, and then we go into the workday world every day, right? We have our business. Those things are just the things that we're working on. And he thought that's the opposite. You don't retreat into a space to figure out ethics. You engage in that stuff of life, the marketplace of ideas, our economics, our environment, the way that we raise our children. That's the places in which ethics are. That's our ethics when we engage in that thing, not the moments that we retreat and just say, I think that ethics for me is this, right? It emerges from this other place. So, he also said that we need to kind of protect ourselves from that push to remain isolated and focus only on ourselves. So much of modern religion is about that. And philosophy, that we need to worry about our own salvation. There harkens to this that go back to ancient times, even in the roots of Stoicism, Christianity, even Buddhism, that the world is always going to be a messed up, horrible place. So, the best you could do is just, live with it or be the person or change yourself, and you're going to somehow change magically the world around that, because rather that is not his approach. He thought that we are extremely contextual beings. We are constantly responding to all of the sense and sense modes and all the things that are happening to there. And that we here in this room would be a society for an ethical culture. That what we're trying to do is to make sure that that elicits everybody's best, not just us, not our own salvation, that out there and working for that true divinity, he said, would arrive. And we're not often commonly use that word, but he thought that that's that wonderful thing in the universe that affirms the worth and dignity of people, that comes from wrestling with it, not from retreating from it. And that's why his emphasis was on deeds before creeds. As the most really in ethical movement, we have two things that we say: deeds before creeds, and then act to elicit the best in others, because that process over there of doing that elicits the best within us as well. So I always have to ask, are we doing that here at the Ethical Society? What are we doing? What kinds of things are we working on to do that? And of course, my notes are now completely out of order. The thing of doing 2 services back to back. So I just wanted to use this Sunday, the first, here we are in January, to kind of highlight the stuff that we're trying to work on with the board, with all the individuals who are coming forward and putting the programs, with the committee work that we have, the people are doing. Are we walking our talk? Or are we just saying we do those things and not doing them, which is the worst thing that any group can do? We lose faith, right? Our thing is not because we lose faith in something else, but when we lose that faith in humanity that Algernon Black talked about, and we're not doing those things. So we have to say, what is the evidence of the things that we're doing? And I kind of want to mention a highlights of some things between now and September 1st. And the world starts over again officially on September 1st. So we're just, it comes to an end there, and we have to start over. So I'm just going to kind of say some of the things that we have. The first thing is that we are paying attention to is the breaches in the wall separating church and state. It's getting worse and worse out there for many different groups. So now it's coming to a place that if I walk as a gay man into a bar or a restaurant or to some place and ask for a service, they are now saying that that person has a right to refuse service to me purely because they disagree with my lifestyle, right? Does that harken back to other times in Americans when we said the same thing, that I'm not going to serve you because of whatever I thought? We're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. How about people who need certain life-saving medications but can't get them because like PrEP, which is the pre-exposure plan that stops people from transmitting or even getting AIDS, that people say, well, I don't believe in people should be having sex outside of marriage or something like that, or gay sex or something like that. Therefore, why is my company paying for their health insurance to do that? Or I could go into a county all across the United States that has been bought up by Catholic churches who buy up the local hospitals and now no longer want to offer birth control within those hospitals. Can you think about that? Where is the line separating church and state? And it's getting worse and worse and worse, to the fact that we now have a Supreme Court says that women no longer have control over the rights of their bodies. Think of that. The thing that many people, even in this room, may have fought so hard is being reversed. So we're going to have a speaker series on the separation of church and state. And we've asked, I thought, let's just ask big names and see if they would come in. They all went, sure. Right. I asked one of them, which is Stephen Green, who's one of the major professors at Willamette University. Unfortunately, he broke his foot, and his doctor saying you are not traveling because of the risk of blood clots. He's out in Oregon. So we didn't get him. He dropped off. But we have Brian Silva, who's going to be coming. He's one of the main people who fought for marriage equality rights in New York City. He's going to be talking about the impact of the breaches in church and state on the LGBT community, but everybody in general, and the impact they have. We have Dan Barker coming. He's one of the vice presidents of the Freedom from Religion Foundation. This man was a former Christian evangelist. He was traveled several countries around the world preaching as he believed it should be, and then one day decided he no longer believed that. He was also one of Christendom's most famous musical Christian composers, and now is writing free thought music. And he's going to be coming in to kind of talk about what the Christian right really wants and why it won't stop until it gets it. Because we're confusing ourselves or fooling ourselves if we think that they're just going to go this so far and then stop there. He has turned his music now away from his all of his tremendous success. You could see him on TV with Oprah Winfrey and everything else doing Christian music, and now he's an atheist. And he's going to be coming and doing a concert here too. So the night before, we're going to have a free thinkers concert. He calls himself a free thinker. That's why I use that. So that'll be there. And then the next morning, he's going to come and give a talk. I think it's always fair that we make sure that we're also listening to the other side, that we're not in an echo chamber. And it's okay for people to always come in here and contest this. So we have two young adults, Benjamin Marcus and Hannah Santos, who are from the Religious Freedom Center. The Religious Forum Center is a Christian on the right of the spectrum group that thinks that we need more public accommodation for religion. And so they're going to come and say, give their reasons why, or should there be no room for religion in the public sphere. So they're going to be trying to present why they think it's okay that we have at least more religion rights or more of those things in conversation. We have Jeremiah Kamara coming. Mr. Kamara is a documentarian. He has a blog. He's quite well known. He has a movie called Contradictions that he made, which is for him what's kind of the changes that are happening in Black churches that he wants to highlight. And so he'll be coming to talk about it. And I'm going to be engaging with him in a conversation because we know the centrality of the church in many groups of color. Historically, that's all we always say. We're here celebrating Dr. King and the work that he did, and he couched everything in religious language. Anyone heard of the Poor People's Campaign, or they've been following that? Yeah, Dr. William Barber. Yeah, who's been doing this kind of stuff, and they use religious metaphors. And so do we even have a right to criticize, well, when does it become too much and what are we going to talk about? So he's going to be engaging in that. And finally, we have Lori Lippman Brown, who's coming in, former representative there. She's now the Secular Coalition for America, who's going to be kind of just typing about all this and the legal clauses and things that we're fighting. So we are going to be paying attention to this kind of stuff. We do need to continue to work for that. The first thing is we need to know what the issues are. We need to have it from several different perspectives so that we can make a decision and figure out how to go from there. So that's our first thing that we have going on. And we can have questions for these if you have them, just throw them out, but I'll come back to that. We are going to be leading up, using this to bring up, once again, our Festival of the Banned book. You know that we had 120 some people here last year reading books and selections. We need to remember that they are not out there banning books. They are banning stories. They're banning narratives. They're banning people. So this year we're calling it Festival of the Banned Book and Banned People, because I think that's what people really need to know, that it's not just something made of paper that they're trying to take away your right. They're trying to silence other people's voices because those voices make them feel uncomfortable, right? Or those contradict what they believe, and they cannot be in a space with people who don't think like them sometimes. And so we're going to have a Festival of the Banned Book and Banned People. You're going to do just like you did last year. I'm hoping that some of you can think of your favorite banned book, and trust me, the list is getting longer and longer and longer and longer. You know, we could find some of these. They're being ghosted from libraries. So even in towns where they're not openly banning books, you could go even to the Teaneck Library and books have suddenly disappeared from the shelves. Where did those go? People took them and they threw them away. They're ghosting books. They're disappearing. They're burning them in other places. Oh, that brings back old memories. That old chestnut from the World War II. So all of these things are kind of happening. And then you'll go upstairs and there will be people who are telling these stories, whose lives are banned, LGBT, trans. I'm hoping to get some from people from the drag community, but critical race theory, people talking about their erasure of Black culture that's happening in banned book, the books that are being selected to. So we're hoping to make this an even bigger thing in our community and hope people can help support that. And we're going to be talking about that each and every Sunday of this so that we can actually lead up to this as well, because we need to take a stand, even in our own state, about the types of things that are being said and not being said. So that's the next thing that we're going to be having coming up in April 2nd. And there'll be lots of this in our newsletter, so hopefully you're getting the newsletter. Now, in addition to kind of those two big kickoff projects, I'm hoping to shift the way that we think about this community. I think of ethical culture and the things that I'm doing as my spiritual practice, as I'll think of later on. But there are other ways that we're not only doing in reach, like the men's club and things like that, the men's dinner, and talking about ourselves, but outreach and the ways that we're trying to focus on that. One of them is the group that Eric helped bring, ethical eating for humane and healthy people and planet. Do you want to say just 2 seconds about that? If you could give them the mic there. So I pay it justice.
Thank you. This is, well, it's a cooking demonstration, but really it's all plant-based. And the idea is you might not be vegan, but you can reduce the amount of meat that you eat, and that will make you healthy. And it's also more humane for the animals. And it also supports the planet because meat culture and meat economy is probably one of the biggest causes of climate change, one of the biggest contributors to that. So again, you're welcome if you're vegan. You're welcome if you're not. This is for all types of eaters. And I'll tell you, Lauren does a great job and makes some fantastic food, and we eat it. So that's the best part, right? We get done, we learn how to cook it, and then we all eat it. So I hope you'll all come for that.
And if you hit the QR code that's out there, you can see videos of them actually doing just that, and people and her giving recipes. And we've done this because of the way that we think wellness works in this country, and that we need to think about the implications of the stuff that we're doing. That's one of the programs that we have going on here. If you walked into the room this morning, you saw that we have a breath circle, which is another way that we need to address wellness. And I'm going to ask Sylvia, do you mind coming up and saying a word about it? You don't have to. I can talk for it. But I may get it about chicken, blood sacrifices. I may get it completely wrong.
Oh, let's not talk about that. Anyway, so this is out of some training that I did with Sky Schools. I'm an educator, and it was one of the ways that we wanted children to learn how to control or emotion regulation when they were able, to focus on their breath, that it brought about a calming and a peaceful mood for them. And so we invite people to come and join us while we practice that again. It's the second and fourth Sunday, 10:40 to 10:55. We meet upstairs and we meet on Zoom. We have our own link. It's a wonderful way to get in touch with your breath and to learn the benefits of calm breathing.
And those are techniques that you can take with you to other groups as well. And I think it's worth going up and listening to that and participating in that and just experiencing that as something that you can offer to other people as well. That's a companion series to that, focusing on wellness, is our mindfulness at midday, which is held, of course, most Fridays at noon, which is lightly guided meditation, very basic yoga movements, sharing of challenges and practices, developing mindful communication. This is something that we offer on Zoom because I know a lot of people are at work at that time and who maybe need that point in their life as part of their own wellness to take a break, to breathe, to walk, and to do those kind of stuff. So another one of the wellness programs that we're running here. We are also, of course, are going to be continuing our family and friends circle. If you got here earlier this morning, you'll see that we have a first service. You're all invited to that, by the way. It's not just for families with young adults, but it's geared to helping them. We catch these ideas in a different way and use games and things like that so that they can understand, like you saw the monkey business thing. We do games, we do kind of inspiration, things like that. What's interesting about this is our attached to our Sunday school program. So we have our Sunday school, but this is the service where they gather. Is we have a couple of different kinds of Sundays. So you may know that the first and third Sunday, they're here in the room. The second Sunday, they're often adventuring out on a social action project. We had the Oxfam dinner here. They did the Haiti Packathon. They picked apples and learned how to make applesauce and serve it to the community. They're doing all of these things so the youth get in the habit of not just talking about, yes, youth, you should go out there and do things. We're taking them one Sunday a month to make sure that that's happening and getting them into the tradition, the habit of doing that. Because we know that the research says that when people start young, they're more likely to continue that as adults. It just becomes part of who they are, the fabric, like, oh, I'm going to volunteer. We used to do that. My family drugged me kicking and screaming, but believe it or not, it worked. And they stay involved in things like that. And then on the fourth Sunday, they just adventure, go out into the world, see other things, see other perspectives. They've gone to the Edison Museum and did tour there. They've gone to Wave Hill to the gardens. They go to other societies. They're going to maybe visit other congregations and see what they're talking about, the kinds of things that they're doing. So this is part of our whole emphasis of the way that we hope to bring up the next generation. We're using a curriculum that we're developing here at the Bergen Ethical Society called STEAM. So you know what STEAM is, right? Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. We're putting the E in front of it because of the ethics of those things. Because even if you do science, technology, engineering, arts, and math, that doesn't mean you're really using them for their ethical intent. So we're asking the youth to think about how we can use these things to influence our world. So that's the first thing that we have doing for our youth. The other big thing that we're going to be focusing on our youth this year, of course, is once again our summer youth employment program. We call it Planet in Progress Technicians. They started last summer. We hired 4 young adults, and they spent 5 weeks with me doing construction in national parks. This year, we have $25,500 that we raised here at the Society through grants to hire them for 8 weeks, 40 hours a week. For 8 weeks to hire youth come in. So we're going to be promoting this program, teaching young adults about these things. Now, why is this important? These are the generation that's going to be facing major climate change initiatives. Their world is going to look radically different than ours even by 2050, right? When they're hitting their prime, they're the ones that are going to have to rebuild the economy from the mess that we need. And they need to know innovation. They need to know how to be able to look at the built environment and say, this is Play-Doh. And when youth don't do that, and youth aren't raised in homes where they can't change the world around them, they get to the idea that the built environment is not malleable. And we want them to put their hands in it and rip things apart and rebuild things and teach construction. And I have young ladies at 15 using tools to rebuild their environments and things like that. So we have the money to run this program again. I take our youth and I match them with 16 other youth from Groundwork Elizabeth, our big partner on this stuff. But luckily we raised money from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Foundation. I raised a bunch of money from that and from the National Park Service to do this. We have $25,000 that this society has raised through grants to provide education for young youth. And this is the work that we're trying to do to get the next generation of youth to think about the problems that they're going to be facing. We know that the other thing that the youth need to understand is they will have to be much more scientifically savvy than even we are. They are going to have to remake the economy. We're going to have to move away from fossil fuels completely. We're going to have to figure out how to conserve more energy, how to think about these things. We need much more intense ways to think about where our food comes from, how we grow it, how do we produce it. That's the world that they are coming into, and we want to make sure that our youth prepared for that. So we're creating another thing that we're calling the Great New Jersey Science Show. Yay! It's going to be kind of a sketch comedy approach to this. But what we're going to do is we're going to train young adults, especially young adults of color, how to talk to other and teach other youth about science. We are lucky that I proposed this idea to, and it doesn't say this, it's on the second page, to Blue Foundry Foundation. And they said, here's $4,500 for your show. And we turned over to Puffin's Foundation and I said, I have $4,500, I need more. And they gave us another $2,500. So we have $7,000 to run a show in which we're going to have young adults talk to young adults about science. These are called informal science learning environments. Everything I do, I try to find the research behind it. This is what I did in my prior work, that when youth talk to other youth about science, they're more likely to listen to it. We're also going to do it in a very friendly, non-engaged I mean, like typical type of science fair type of stuff. It's going to be sketch comedy. Think Saturday Night Live meets Bill Nye the Science Guy. But also reinterpreted in the minds of young adults. So maybe PG-17, PG-13, but their way of unpacking them, their way of explaining the science to each other using a comedy routine show. That's why we're eventually going to have drapes up here and for this kind of stuff. The question that what we need to do is to raise the scientific literacy of young adults. And we also need to know that currently the science career pathway in this country is not reflective of the diversity of this nation. That's a problem. Scientists do not look reflective of the diversity of the rest of the nation. That's the diversity gap in science. We need to close that gap. So specifically focusing on youth of color who are talking with other youth of color about science and getting them involved in a fun, playful thing, raising the scientific literacy of the group and bringing in scientists, which means if you teach science or you're a teacher, or you're an educator, I'm hoping you're going to show up, be part of the audience, and so we can rope you into skips. And we're going to be using this to reach out to other scientists and groups and laboratories and all of these scientific groups that are working around us. We're going to bring you in, Paolo. You just got a new job at Columbia University. Yay! Absolutely fantastic. And what? And the engineering department. So this is, what's that? Yay, fantastic. And that's the kind of thing that we want to bring in scientists, when we're bringing people, say, here was my pathway and things like that. You need to know that it's very, very difficult if you're a poor person in this country to get up to the science careers. Usually you're in school districts that are underperforming and under-resourced, right? That's the first thing. You then get financial aid to get to college. We all went to college, took calculus and failed the first time, or struggled with it and had all these problems with it. And we go, oh, I'll just take the class again. When I was in Texas in 1980s, it was $15 a credit hour, $15. I think it's more than that now. But imagine you're on financial aid and you take a class and they say, well, if your GPA drops below 2.0, we're going to kick you out of the university because you can't get financial aid. So what do you think youth do? They change to majors, right? They change their majors. So that's one of the barriers. And then to go into a field where no one looks like you. So we're going to address all that. The best, the only ways that we can here is to create the Great New Jersey Science Show and make that happen. I'm also happy to announce that because we need other scientific experiences and careers, I've reached out to the New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection and the Hudson River Foundation. They had a grant, a very small grant, to teach local people about rivers and the health of rivers using eels. There were 3 organizations in New Jersey that won them, and we were one of them. Yay! We're going to actually have an eel study project here within the Ethical Society. If you want to get involved in community science and help the young adults do this, we want to let them know that there's a river a block and a half away that has all of these challenges, and that we need to know that what's in the river and how those things impact our communities. This is one of the last life corridors flowing through this area. We've cut off the bears, we've cut off other species that are coming through here. The river is one of the last corridors. And of course, as you also recently, 45%, I mean, they say don't eat the fish out of those things because it's polluted. And we're spending all this money to fix rivers in other places. Let's fix the Hackensack River. So that's part of the reason we're doing that. And if any of you want to participate in that grant or any of these things I've said so far, I'm hoping you'll consider that. The other thing that we did is to think about, why do we mess things up? Why do we trash things? Why is it that we think it's okay to have brute commercialization of our area? Now, I'm not anti-business. I think business is fantastic, but there are right ways to do business and there are wrong ways to do it different. That's all we're saying, right? But we say it's okay to go. I know people are upset that they cut down all the trees over here at Overpeck Park, you know, that were covering that brownfield over there. People were up in arms and asked me to come and join them. I'm like, why did they do that? I figured it was because it's a brownfield, that's polluted land, it was punching through, but now I hear they want to dredge and drop stuff there. What the heck is going on? So why is it that when people try to become attached to places, that we don't protect them or we don't care and we let them happen? It's an interesting question for us as secularists. You know, we have in religion sacred grounds, that there are places on our planet that are sacred and inviolable, that all these rules about that, and when people go there, we don't damage them. How do secular people say the same thing? I proposed that as a question to the New Jersey Council of Humanities, and they said, here's $6,000 to study that. So we got another grant for $6,080 to actually study, I'm calling it Through These Gates, of thinking of when you go to a place, what's called a limnus gate, why is something a sacred ground and how does it become sacred ground? I'm going to be paying some of you to be researchers. You're going to go to the library. You're going to help me look through these things. We're going to bring in all these nonprofits. We're going to test these out. And we're even going to experiment. We're going to build projects in a couple of parks through this grant and then gauge people's reactions to them. So how do we say that not everything in this country is for sale? Not everything can just be thrown or destroyed or overdeveloped, that there are some places which, for lack of a better word, we call sacred. We want to understand place attachment, and we, the Bergen Ethical Society, want to offer that information out to the world. The great thing is we enter, this is a what's called a development grant. You do this grant, and if we like the ideas, we're probably going to get the grant after this, which is for twice the amount of money, to actually broadcast that out to more things. So I'm hoping we can train more of you into these ideas. Why do we become, how do we protect places? What are other things you can do that lead to place attachments, such as stories and narratives and experiences and all these things? So that's the other group that we have coming up as well. I'm a busy beaver. The other thing that we need to figure out, though, is why we divide, how we divide, the things that come into our minds that separate us from one another, and to notice our own blind spots. I think the thing about the monkey video, in a way, points out that when we're only paying attention to certain things, we don't pay attention to other things. That framing happens in our community all the time. And we need to have other frames occasionally for people who say to us, you need to think, look a little bit different. Let me paint a different picture and see if you could see the world about that. Luckily, we have our anti-racism accountability circle. Dwight Pinozzo has been doing a lot of work on this. How many people have participated in the circle so far? Just a couple of you in this room. Oh, some hands online. Yes, things like that. Dwight's doing a fantastic job. They're reading books and looking and trying to understand the wisdom from other people so that we can widen our gaze. I think if you have the time, you should maybe participate in one of these circles. Anti-racism, it's not enough not to be a racist. We have to be anti-racism, right? We have to go out and we have to dismantle the institutionalized things, the racism, the things that shape our perspective and only allow us to see certain things. So we have this group that meets actually on the second Sundays, and it's also just now on Zoom so that people can participate in that. But if you've been hearing from the news, it's not just about the cultural differences that separate us. We also have to think about gender differences and why those are important. People are having a lot of fights over that. Once again, I think gender is banned in Florida. I don't know how you describe yourself, but you know, they're banning everything more and more. And people, what is the first thing that the governor of Arkansas, did you hear that? Was her first act? She became governor. She's Huckabee's, Sarah Huckabee, thank you very much. She became governor. Was her first official act, right? Banning gender nouns. No more gender nouns can be used. That was her first official act. That's going to be helpful for kids. And I have to tell you, it's a crazy kind of thing. And once again, we have a group that's coming together, the Gender Explorations Accountability Circle, to help us understand what is the conversation about gender. Some of us go, well, yeah, there's just male and female. You know, and there's so much more than that. And that maybe what we're trying to do is figure out what does it mean to be human and not just limit us to categories. And so I invite you to come and participate in this group as well, and just to think about who we are and what we're doing. The other thing, of course, that we continue to offer is our Conversemos, right? How many of you have participated in Conversemos? Raise your hand. You want to say a little bit about it also, Sylvie? hold on a second.
Yes, Javier is a wonderful guide for us to practice our Spanish conversation. It's very informal. It's a lot of fun. We spend a lot of time laughing. And it's really, really helpful for those of us who are trying to further our conversational Spanish. It's a lot of fun. And in the summer, we actually went out and had some dinners together, practicing our Spanish and enjoying a nice meal.
And how much Spanish do you have to know to be able to participate in this group?
You don't have to know any Spanish. You just have to be willing to participate. Right. Un poquito está muy bien.
I think it's so important that when we walk into a place, it's nice occasionally when people respect our culture and use the words, the languages that we use. And of course, we're right next to Mexico. We're also have so many people who've come from other countries who speak Spanish who living in here. It is part of one of our the languages that are used here frequently in the United States. If you're from a place where I am, where almost everybody, when you walk into a store, is greeted that way. And it's just a good way to keep that up and to remind us to practice our Spanish and our ability to communicate and to make connections with other people so that we don't fall more and more into isolated groups. We are also thinking about the impact of economics on people and how that influences their lives. Ann Wallman has been running a program called the Job Club for quite a long period of time. And Ann, are you online? Anybody seen her? So the flyer is out there. She meets on a routine basis, not only to help women who transition. We were realizing that a lot of women who had raised children who had left the workforce were now trying to re-enter workforce at a much older age. Think about that. Men, that imagine if you hadn't started your career and you had to delay that for a longer period of time, maybe for that, or people who just went from part-time for health reasons or whatever to underdo that. And we have a professional here at the Ethical Society who knows how to help people make those transitions and how to help shift their frame and their mind and the things that they have to do and build them up a little bit, saying you can re-enter the workforce. It doesn't matter what age or how long of a gap you took, that there are ways to re-enter the workforce. And so we have our job club that's offered here. And I forgot to have the flyer here and I apologize, but I'm going to put that right there or up there maybe. So we do have another mic. We also know that we have to support other ways of thinking and knowing and understanding the world. We have two programs that are actually bringing up the arts. Who was here for the open mic night Friday night? We had 22 of us in the room. It was packed every time. We've only had 3. And every time I do this, I turn around, there's more people and more people. I think it's going to grow. And what's fantastic about it is it allows people who are just trying to use their music to transform the world or trans their lives, or just feel confident of getting up there in front of a bunch of people and speaking poetry or saying their words. And we need to create places where people can come and just do that. How lovely that is that you wrote that piece of music. Who wrote that? You wrote that. Oh my God, fantastic. And your voice, so beautiful. And to do that, to offer that, because sometimes there are some things that no matter how we try, we can't have the words for them. And sometimes we put them into music or we put them into poetry, and we need to create spaces for that. So do you want to say anything more about that, Susan, who created that along with Kate?
So the whole person sometimes involves artistic expression, because as you said, sometimes it's in here and it doesn't come out in words or in a book, but it will come out in an artistic expression. And we're actually even saying, if you have visual images that you want to share with us, bring that. We've got computers. We'll figure out. That's right. Dance, anything like that. Really come and just show us who you are.
Thank you.
Right.
And in fact, we're also supporting the Resistance Cafe, which is another way that they can do this. The Resistance Cafe is another open mic that's held here. And we hope some of you come out there. It's a little bit more political. These are people who specifically want to talk about what they think is going on in this country and to to express that through music, a lot more electronic music and those kinds of stuff. But when you're sitting in the room, they may be doing postcards like Lisa brings to us and things like that, and rock the vote type things, or get out there and those things. So they're trying to find a way to engage the audience, and hopefully you'll come for that open mic as well, and to give people who are out there on the front lines trying to change the world a little bit of sanctuary to come back together, be with people who are not arguing with them, and for them just to have fun together. So places like that are so important as well. We also, of course, have a lot of community in-reach. So this is our outreach, trying to do our job on the Society for Ethical Culture out there. And then we also think about our culture in this room. I do want to thank Elliot, who organizes men's dinners. So once a month they get together and they can have up to 9 of us in the room, and hopefully more men will come out. And we get together and we have dinner and talk about issues that are kind of important to us. And Elliot organizes that every single month. And we're going out to restaurants. And Elliot, are you there?
I am.
You want to say something about that?
Well, it's not limited to 9 people. If we could get 30 men, it would be just fine. We have not decided yet.